Hello and welcome. My clinical practice dates almost 30 years. In the beginning of my clinical practice, I worked at Tulane University Medical Center in New Orleans, and we had a significant number of tube-fed patients who couldn't eat voluntarily on their own. And what we noticed is that the longer they were tube-fed, the more likely they were to develop diarrhea. So one of the strategies that we implemented was adding yogurt to this tube feeding to blunt the diarrhea. Didn't really know why it worked, it just worked. And so now as we fast forward, we have this whole new exciting arena of pre and probiotics that we're going to explore. It has been said that our body is formed around our gut. As such, think about your intestinal tract as the body's gatekeeper. This intricate balance of good and bad bacteria, healthy intestinal tissue, and optimal diet can keep the gut function normal, as well as confer some additional health benefits. Well, this lecture is going to explore the science of prebiotics and probiotics, as well as supplements that can help maintain good intestinal health. But let's start with some definitions. What is a probiotic? Well, simply stated, a probiotic is healthy bacteria. It is found in foods and now as food additives or in functional foods. Examples of food sources containing probiotics are fermented foods, such as yogurt products like kefir. However, watch out, you chocolate lovers. Some chocolate yogurts are pasteurized, and that pasteurization process is high heat and it kills the probiotics. These are live cultures and are killed with heat. Other fermented products include soy products like tempeh and miso and some soy beverages. Some juices, pickles, and sauerkraut are also fermented products and therefore would contain some probiotics. In probiotic foods and supplements, the bacteria might have been originally present, or they may have been added during the preparation and production. Another way of looking at probiotic, it means pro-life. The necessity of these compounds was first identified by Dr. Elie Metchnikoff, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist in the early 1900s. Dr. Metchnikoff observed that Bulgarian peasants who consumed fermented food and milk products lived longer and healthier lives. Probiotics, as a definition, are defined by the World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization as live microorganisms. That's a key point. Live microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. Although an accepted definition exists, there are no national standards for identifying the level of active probiotic in foods or supplements. Also, there is no true requirement for the amount of probiotic needed when this compound is found in food. Little concern exists regarding the amounts needed because remember, these are live organisms, and once they are in your gut, can auto-populate and live there very happily on their own. So, is this just a passing fad, or is this the fountain of digestive health and wellness? Well, let's take a look a little bit at the types of probiotics. In general, they are bacteria and yeast. Two major bacteria types include lactobacillus, and keep in mind lactobacillus is the name of the central organism, but there are multiple species, and you might be familiar with acidophilus as a lactobacillus culture. Bifidobacterium, bifidus, is also, again, the general name. Bifidobacterium is a general name, with bifidus being the particular strain that we're looking at. The type of bacteria confers the function and benefit. So not all bacteria is going to have the identical function. Some bacterial strains may confer immune protection. Others promote optimal gut function or regularity. Another probiotic type is yeast, with the major type being Saccharomyces boulardii. And again, this is a probiotic yeast, and sometimes you hear it referred to as nutritional yeast. But because these organisms are live, we have to feed this bacteria. And probiotics rely on the fuel provided in the diet. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. We can either have a really healthy diet with adequate amounts of great food for the bacteria, or we can have a highly processed diet and, again, not going to provide adequate amounts of food for the bacteria. The fuel that feeds the probiotics is called prebiotics. And as a definition, it is non-digestible food components that support the growth or activity of probiotics. Simply put, prebiotics are the food for friendly bacteria. Fiber compounds are the most significant prebiotics. Specifically inulin, and don't confuse that with insulin, which is a hormone. Specifically, inulin is a type of fiber, and its byproduct, fructooligosaccharides, FOS, and galactooligosaccharides, GOS. Now let's pause for a second and define these terms. In the carbohydrate lecture, we talked about mono and disaccharides, 1 or 2 glucose units, and then we jumped to polysaccharides, 20 or more glucose units. Well, there's an intermediate called oligosaccharides, and these are 8 to 10 carbohydrate units. So fructooligosaccharide would be a compound predominantly made of fructose with 8 to 10 carbohydrate units in that chain. The major food sources of inulin and its metabolite, fructose oligosaccharides, in the American diet includes foods maybe that you don't normally consume, things like chicory root, Jerusalem artichoke, leeks, and onions. The amount of inulin and fructooligosaccharide in chicory root, for example, is there's 24 grams of inulin and 43 grams of fructose oligosaccharide in a 3-ounce serving. Well, here's the key point. If you look now at a lot of high-fiber breakfast cereals and bars, they are using chicory root as the fiber source. So when they use chicory root, they are adding essentially inulin and fructose oligosaccharides to that food without naming them. They're just talking about the chicory root, and you'll see this popping up in grocery stores. Fructose oligosaccharides are also being added to liquid nutritional meal replacements such as Ensure. So if you remember back to my example about my tube-fed patient, one of the challenges was in the early days of tube feeding, we didn't know anything about fructose oligosaccharides, had no clue. And now when fructose oligosaccharides are added to these liquid nutritional meal replacements, some of which you drink orally, some of which are in a tube feeding, what happens is you can now blunt or reduce the incidence of diarrhea by consuming these products that have FOS added to them. Now, as with almost everything in clinical nutrition, more is not better. Doses of above 15 grams of these prebiotics can cause gastric upset, which should make sense because these are basically fiber-containing foods. So together, this marriage of pre and probiotics work to fuel this wonderful complex called a synbiotic. They work synergistically together to optimize gut function. So now let's take a look a little bit more at the gut environment. At birth, your gut is sterile. There's no bacteria in your gut. It is colonized by bacteria depending on the mode of feeding. Well, breast milk contains oligosaccharide. So once again, Mother Nature steps in and provides us with the nutrition that we need. The oligosaccharides from breast milk function as a prebiotic. The breast milk itself contains probiotic bacteria that can help to confer some of the benefits that we associate with breastfeeding. These bacteria support the immune function through a unique and wonderful physiological response. The intestinal tract is also involved in the immune response through gut-associated lymphoid tissue, which is also known as GALT. Large areas of lymphoid tissues are found in the gut in the Peyer's patches, and we learned a little bit about these in the lecture on digestion. The intestinal tract represents a portion of the immune system. So how many of you have ever thought, gee, I wonder where my immune system resides? Well, a good percentage of that is going to reside in your intestinal tract. And does that make sense? If our bodies are wrapped around our gut, we need to have an immune defense system in our intestinal tract to prevent bacterial invasion to our blood supply. Also, it aids in the prevention of food-borne illnesses. In gut injury or infection, dangerous or unhealthy pathogenic bacteria can translocate. And what does that mean? It means that these bacteria or their toxins can leave the small intestine and cross into the blood supply, causing bloodborne infections. Some studies suggest that even healthy bacteria may be able to translocate. So you better check with your healthcare provider if you've had a significant bowel injury or surgery, because any bacterial translocation, good or bad, that's not supposed to end up in the blood supply can make you ill. Bacterial translocation is considered to be a major cause of infection, particularly in ill or the hospitalized patient. Well, now we've got health claims that are being made for prebiotics. Some studies suggest improvement in blood sugar and blood cholesterol, but results are not consistent. And why might that be? Why aren't we always going to have consistent results when we start to talk about some of these research studies? Well, part of that is because we're all not identical twins, and we're all going to have unique physiological responses. The other reasons why we're not seeing consistent results is because the science of pre and probiotics is relatively new. Improved magnesium absorption is also being claimed, along with a slight increase in copper absorption. However, improved mineral absorption really is not a valid reason for taking prebiotics. And again, I think what ends up happening is that as the science emerges, marketing jumps on the nutritional bandwagon, and now we're going to have a lot of different products on the market claiming pre and probiotic benefits. Prebiotics may also reduce atopic dermatitis as well as infections in the first 2 years of life. Now, why would that make sense? A nice little study was done taking a look at 2 groups of infants with parental history of allergies who were randomized to 2 groups. One group got prebiotics and the other did not. Those in the intervention group, those receiving the prebiotics, had significantly less dermatitis, skin irritation, and fewer infections. The benefits extended beyond the length of the intervention. Now, why might that be? Keep in mind, these are live organisms, and the gut can colonize good bacteria, and that's the plausible explanation. The reason why the benefits continued beyond the study period was because the gut had colonized. These good bacteria set up shop, and they were growing in the small intestine. Well, what does the science say about probiotics? In general, probiotics can assist in optimizing health. Lactobacillus acidophilus is one of the lactobacillus strains that has beneficial effects. Some evidence suggests that Lactobacillus acidophilus cultured dairy products, including sweet acidophilus milk and yogurt, can reduce vaginal yeast infections. Other studies suggest that probiotics may actually prevent sexually transmitted diseases via changes in vaginal pH. Now, I probably would not suggest that that would be your only protection against sexually transmitted diseases. I don't think I'd hang my hat completely on pre or probiotics. Lactobacillus may also aid in the reduction of cholesterol. In a study done with 1 cup of yogurt with active cultures or a placebo, individuals consuming probiotic-rich foods showed a 2.9% reduction in cholesterol. The mode of action here appears to be inhibition of the cholesterol-producing enzyme. Probiotics have recently been associated with the reduction of obesity in pregnant mothers after they receive probiotic during the first trimester of pregnancy. Approximately 25% of those receiving probiotics develop central obesity compared to a higher percentage of those who receive diet advice alone. So this was presented at the European Society for Obesity, and this is the first study suggesting an association between probiotic use and body fat management. Now again, this science is in its infancy, so we cannot make the quantum leap to say that if you're going to reduce body fat, everybody should be using probiotic-rich foods. Major benefits of the lactobacillus organism for digestive health are relatively well known. And in those with lactose intolerance, the inability to digest lactose, milk sugar, up to 50% of the lactose in fermented milk is actually digested by the lactase that is produced by the lactobacillus organism, providing an easily digested, high-calcium dairy product for those who struggle with lactose intolerance. Okay, One of the original review studies with Lactobacillus acidophilus and other probiotics suggested that this family of probiotics has been shown to reduce diarrhea and other digestive diseases. Okay, the proposed mechanism is that these bacteria reduce the pH of the gut and crowd out pathogenic bacteria. So they prevent that translocation. They prevent some of the concerns that are associated with these pathogenic bacteria. As such, some studies suggest, although not all, that probiotics may actually decrease the symptoms associated with traveler's diarrhea, irritable bowel, and even Crohn's disease. A recent meta-analysis indicated that probiotic therapy can significantly reduce the bloating associated with irritable bowel and improves overall symptoms of inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, here's a tip for you. For many of the women that I deal with that are struggling with IBS-like symptoms, the addition of a probiotic, in my experience, reduces that bloating by up to 40%. So it's a really great and very healthy strategy to take. Now, what about antibiotic-associated diarrhea? Think back to all my folks that were tube-fed at Tulane. One of the reasons why everybody developed diarrhea is, one, the products didn't have the wonderful prebiotics of fructose oligosaccharides. The other reason everybody was on antibiotic therapy. So if you're taking antibiotics, keep in mind that antibiotics kill all bacteria. And if indeed you're given probiotics, it can reduce the severity and the intensity of the diarrhea. I'm going to say that again. Antibiotics kill all bacteria, and probiotics can repopulate the gut with healthy bacteria. But I'm going to caution you here. Think about taking your antibiotic and your probiotic at the same time. It's probably not how you want to time them, because if indeed I'm taking a medication that's going to kill bacteria, I don't want to take my probiotic, so spread those out. Well, you know how it goes. If we get a little bit of good press on these pre and probiotics, now we enter into the supplement world. And supplements can create challenges. Keep in mind, all of the studies that have been done on whole foods. So when we talk about supplements, we have to remember purity and standardization remain issues as they do for other supplements. Currently, the issues associated with probiotic supplements include: could they be contaminated with other less desirable organisms? There's certainly disagreement on the amount of probiotic needed. Some authorities recommend at least 1 billion organisms a day, and I know that sounds huge, but we have trillions of bacteria in our digestive tract. A recent analysis showed that only 8 out of 13 products claiming to be probiotics listed the amount of probiotics on their label. Certainly, we have to be concerned about the issues of probiotic viability. And what does that mean? As opposed to other supplements, probiotics are live and are not going to survive harsh conditions. So one of the things that you can do is to refrigerate these products, and it may prolong the life. Again, we're trying to reduce their exposure to high temperatures. Exposure to moisture, like in your bathroom, may reduce the effectiveness of these products. We also have to consider, will these products survive in stomach acid? And the avoidance of competing pathogenics are key concerns in probiotic supplements. Although not all probiotics can withstand that very low pH and stomach acid, there may be still some benefit from them. Some of the bacteria species that do not survive stomach acid produce by themselves significant amounts of lactic acid, which may inhibit the growth of unfriendly bacteria, which is a really good thing. So again, it may not be the probiotic itself, it's the byproduct, in this case, lactic acid. Well, we got to ask the question, are probiotics always safe? And the key point here is gut integrity. Damage to the gut wall can allow any bacteria to translocate. However, the long positive history with probiotics, and I'm going to make my own comment here, probiotics in food have allowed them to be granted what is called GRAS status, meaning generally regarded as safe. As we have seen, probiotics can assist in optimizing good health. However, some studies suggest that those with an altered immune system should be cautious of products containing probiotics. Clearly, more research needs to be conducted to find both additional benefits and possible concerns with their use. Keep in mind, our bodies like to go down the middle of the road, and probiotic foods are very beneficial. The question is, what about probiotic supplements? So where does this leave us regarding probiotics and prebiotics in the American diet? First and foremost, if you get enough fiber in your diet, then you are getting enough prebiotics. Certainly if you're eating fiber-enriched foods, foods with chicory, inulin, you're certainly getting adequate amounts of prebiotics. Keep in mind though, vary your fiber sources and just don't label read for chicory root. As for probiotics, consider adding some fermented foods to your diet. One of my favorite suggestions is to use Greek yogurt to replace sour cream in recipes, from dips to toppings to baked goods, and even beef stroganoff. The key, however, is just don't boil it. So if you're making a wonderful beef stroganoff, add the Greek yogurt at the end of the cooking period, not at the beginning of the cooking period. Well, now we come to frequently asked questions. What happens if we don't consume probiotics or prebiotics? Is this detrimental to the effect of our health? Well, historically, have people always had a source of this nutrient? Certainly throughout time, when we ate more whole foods with fiber, and isn't that the key? It's the whole foods with fiber. In some fermented products, we had exposure to a wide variety of pre and probiotics. But have we moved away from this as an American culture? And the answer is yes. The more highly processed a food becomes, the more hands that touch it along the way. That means what we're actually doing is removing some of the fiber, adding more sugars and fats, and reducing even the prebiotic content of our diet. Certainly, by making this switch in the American diet to more convenient and fast foods, we have now made our guts more nutritionally challenged. Another question. You said that exposure to moisture may reduce the effectiveness in probiotics, but isn't our digestive tract full of moisture? Well, yes, that's absolutely true. But what we're looking at is chronic exposure of the supplements to moisture, like in your bathroom, in a hot, if you're transporting fiber supplements back and forth to work, probiotic supplements back and forth to work, the heat in your car, the moisture in your car would also be very detrimental. Well, are there certain times in the life cycle that probiotics and prebiotics are important? What about illness, pregnancy, times of stress, times of unusually great physical activity? Okay? Well, the major reason why individuals get gut challenged is antibiotics. And the major reason why individuals end up with this imbalanced bacterial complement, again, is antibiotic therapy. Doesn't mean that you can eliminate antibiotics from your repertoire of treating disease, but you have to be conscious that once I introduce antibiotics, once antibiotics are part of my medical treatment, I'm going to have to make sure that I repopulate my gut with what it needs. So again, you could start out by just having additional yogurt when you're on antibiotics. You could have some additional fiber when your gut's a little bit resolved from that antibiotic therapy. Keep in mind, there's a famous way that we always treated antibiotic diarrhea, and it was called the brat diet. And it was bananas, rice, applesauce. Some people say tea, others say toast. I'm going to modify that for you and call it the Bray diet. And I'm going to say bananas, rice, applesauce, and add some yogurt. And now we've got, again, a little bit of fiber in the bananas and the applesauce. We've got some carbohydrate, and lo and behold, we've now introduced a probiotic into the mix. Now, should I add probiotic and prebiotic supplements to my children's diet? What about my aging parents? Unless there is an unusual gut disease, I would say probiotics are safe, and some cultures add yogurt to the diet of infants as one of the first food given. Keep in mind, breast milk has not only a prebiotic in the fructose oligosaccharides, it also has probiotics in it. So the first food that we're feeding babies, breast milk, is also going to be a great source of pre and probiotics. As for aging parents, the same recommendation holds true. Fermented foods are always going to be a good idea, again, with some gentle sources of fiber. Another question. I'll be traveling to some countries where I have to drink bottled water. Would eating the local yogurt help me to avoid traveler's diarrhea? Possibly, but I don't think I would risk a waterborne illness, such as a parasitic infection, and think that a probiotic will ride on its white horse to save you. You have to have common sense that prevails. But I would encourage you that if you're traveling and you're in a foreign country, one of the key things that I would like you to think about is, can I try some of the local yogurts? Would that be a great way of introducing some wonderful prebiotics and probiotics into my diet? Again, in many foreign countries that are still, particularly when you travel to more remote regions, they're still eating a whole food diet. So I think the challenge is that when you eat a whole food diet, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, adding in some fermented foods, that is going to be your best defense against these chronic foodborne infections. Now, the other question that I get on a repeat basis is, well, I don't like yogurt and I don't really want to eat fiber, so what do? Can't I just take a pill? And certainly throughout these series of lectures, we're making the case, we're laying the framework for whole food is always going to prevail. So maybe you don't like yogurt, but could you eat a different fermented food? Could you have a soy drink that's fermented? Could you try miso, or could you try tempeh or some other fermented foods? Maybe if you're from the part of the country that I am where sauerkraut is really very popular, maybe it's not yogurt, but it's sauerkraut on your very lean or low-fat hot dog that you're having when you're grilling at home. So there's lots of ways of introducing these. I think the common sense is, don't always think pill. We've got a lot of issues with dietary supplements in this country, and again, with probiotics, just like every other supplement that's out there, we've got challenges that make that not the first choice. It is a choice, but not necessarily the best choice. So keep in mind, common sense prevails. Mother Nature laid the framework by putting all these wonderful things in breast milk, and it's our job to make sure that we continue on this great path to optimal health. And thank you very much.